9 years since You Cannot Redo and 14 years since this whole project began, Rebuild of Evangelion has finally come to an end. Although it received its Japanese release back in March, the film only recently made its international debut on Amazon. But was it worth the wait? In short, yes. It might be the hype talking, but my initial impression is that Thrice Upon a Time is a worthy addition to the Evangelion franchise that both narratively and thematically led to the hope Evangelion producer Toshimichi Otsuki said it would back in 2006. All those years ago, he said, "With the situation of society at that time, Anno's internal problems and so on, and especially because the film version ended ruinously, with the world destroyed, and Shinji and Asuka the only survivors, continuing the Eva of 12 years ago is not possible. However, with the passing of 12 years, and the turn of a new age, Anno has settled things within himself. The new films should be, in a sense, Eva with a happy end, or, if I had to express it in a single phrase, a story which leads to hope." Anno must have heard my cries because after opening the last two films with back-to-back action set pieces, he mercifully only has one at the start of Thrice Upon a Time, and then devotes almost an hour to quieter character moments. This character-driven section answers many of the lingering questions from the previous films and fleshes out the characters in ways they've desperately needed in the retelling. And honestly, it's some of my favorite material in the franchise. It's a journey about growing up and recovering from trauma. A major part of either process is figuring out what works and what doesn't. No one has all the answers, and no one ever will. You're going to make mistakes, plenty of them, but you won't develop or improve if you don't continue to fight and push forward. This is all conveyed through heartfelt moments involving Rei integrating into society, Shinji learning to accept his failures and forgive himself, and former classmates reflecting on their lives in the years since they last saw Shinji. It's true to the description Anno gave of Evangelion back in 2007. In the press statement for Rebuild, he described Eva as a story where the main character witnesses many horrors with his own eyes, but still tries to stand up again. A story of will, a story of moving forward, if only just a little. A story of fear, where someone who must face indefinite solitude fears reaching out to others, but still wants to try. Albeit hornier than ever, the early section of this film alone is an excellent expression of those ideas and represents the work of a mature filmmaker. Although thematically speaking, it isn't anything new for him. These are messages Anno has been trying to impart since the start of Evangelion. In a June 1996 New Type magazine interview, he said, "By not paying attention to childish ideas, which they are subjected to, we take the anime fans for being stupid. They do not leave their comfortable little world. They feel safe. They have nothing solid in themselves on which to rely. That's why I try to go to the rescue of Japanese animation. I do not say, like Shuji Terayama, to throw away your books and flee the city, but to go to town and meet people. Why can I say that? Well, I noticed what was missing for me, in my heart. For 21 years, I have been an anime fan, and now, 35 years old, I notice with sorrow, I am nothing but an honest fool." But back to Thrice Upon a Time. The quieter character moments gives way to an action-packed middle section. As usual, it's the worst part of these rebuild films, and never achieves the excellence that the battles against the mass production units did in End of Evangelion. Yet it's entertaining stuff and doesn't wear out its welcome. But as Gendo tells Shinji, their conflict will not be resolved with might. Shinji must come face to face with the demons that have defined his life, the lives of the other characters, and the entire franchise. The baggage from the past must be properly resolved before things can move forward. And that's what the last chunk of the film is devoted to. Franchise creator Hideaki Anno isn't the depressed man he was 26 years ago, and the conclusion of his latest film is the reflection of a happier soul. Evangelion has served its purpose in Anno's life, and he's ready to move on. Hard to imagine things getting more explicit than stabbing all Evangelions and creating a world without them. Furthermore, it appears my theory about Anno keeping the pilots young, despite the 14-year time skip back in You Cannot Redo, was confirmed here. While some joked it was merely a way to dispel the moral questions about sexualizing these characters, there was clearly more interesting matters at work. In a meta-narrative sense, Evangelion was keeping the pilots in a form of arrested development. Note how the non-pilots have become adults, have moved on, they drink, they have spouses, they have children. They have greater responsibilities than they had to contend with as naive kids. And once the Eva pilots resolve their struggles, they too are allowed to grow up. The film ends with them as adults in the real world, even switching from animation to live action in its final moments to drive the point home even further. If this all seems on the nose, that was the intent, because people didn't get it the first time. In 2012, during an interview to promote his special effects exhibition, Anno griped, "As for the previous Evangelion, many people took what I made as entertainment and turned it into a target of dependence. While in the same interview he said he gave up on criticizing escapist otaku because there's nothing that can be done for them, the latest film suggests otherwise. More than ever, Evangelion is a beast that bears its soul and shouts at the heart of the world, and maybe the long gap between You Cannot Redo and Thrice Upon a Time was needed for Anno to renew his spirit, and if so, it was well worth the wait. Thrice Upon a Time serves not only as the conclusion for its immediate film series, it's a reflection and hopefully final word on Hideaki Anno's time with Evangelion. It engages with both the new theatrical editions and the original television series, making very creative use of stock footage from the previous rebuilds and incorporating imagery as well as actual footage from the original television series. In general, despite some questionable CG, Thrice Upon a Time is a gorgeous film. It's easily the best the series has looked since End of Evangelion. There's also the return to unconventional storytelling methods and gimmicks the latter half of the television series and its cinematic finale are famous or infamous for. Additionally, Anno appears to have picked up a thing or two about montages from Makoto Shinkai's Your Name and Weathering With You. One could split hairs about the plot being difficult to understand or not making complete sense, though plot and lore have pretty much always been secondary to the characters and the message. Nothing has changed in that regard. One might also complain that this film relies too much on the past, but without the trip down memory lane, it wouldn't be as effective. For example, there's role reversals like Ritsuko shooting Gendo instead of Gendo shooting her, as in End of Evangelion, and Shinji giving therapy to his friends instead of his friends helping him through his problems, like in the final episodes of the television series. As mentioned before, this is Anno confronting Evangelion's history, and the contrast it creates reveals how much his mindset has changed. It may not completely atone for all the sins of the previous Rebuild films, and the flaws of those films keeps Rebuild from reaching the heights of the original television series as a whole, though the last film finds a way to make it all worthwhile. It's just about everything Evangelion ever was. A tokusatsu tribute, a character study, a man pouring his heart and soul into his work, an experimental, sexually charged experience littered with religious iconography and exciting action sequences, but most importantly, emotionally effective and intellectually stimulating cinema meant to inspire. With how much of a cash cow this property is and the nature of the marketplace, Thrice Upon a Time is unlikely to be the end of Evangelion. But it might be the end of it for Anno. Not only is the tagline, "Bye bye, all of Evangelion," Anno had this to say during his NHK special earlier this year.
エヴァンゲリオンは今回で一応終わるは終わるんですか？
終わるは終わります。まあ物語としては終わっちゃいます。
思い入れみたいな。
ない。
そんないんです。
But who can blame him? A huge chunk of the last 25 years of his life has been devoted to this franchise. And, counting the last episodes of the television series and End of Evangelion, this is now the third time he has attempted to bring the franchise to a close. While in a recent interview he did suggest he may one day revisit these characters, for now he said he is content. Besides, I'd rather him use his current creative and financial freedom to explore new avenues. He's in a better position now to help the industry like he has talked so much about, even going as far as to say it was a major reason for revisiting Eva in the first place. When and how Evangelion will see the light of day again is anyone's guess at the moment, though as Anno has suggested before, it will likely be at the hands of another creator. But if this were to be the final word on Evangelion as a whole, it's a pretty fantastic note to go out on.